me ask you this. Did Reverend James Cleveland really die from AIDS?
Whoa.
Of gospel from all over the world together. Asked them what they thought about the idea.
James Cleveland, the King of Gospel, was revered for his divine music and 4 Grammy Awards. However, his passing unveiled shocking secrets that tarnished his legacy. His son, Christopher Harris, exposed disturbing facts that sent shockwaves through the gospel community. What sinister deeds led to Cleveland being labeled the most evil man in gospel? To understand the startling allegations about James Cleveland, we must first explore the formative experiences that molded his life. Early life and career. James Cleveland was born on December 5, 1931, in the heart of Chicago, a city brimming with gospel music. His parents, hard-working and deeply religious, raised him in an environment where faith and music were intertwined. His grandmother, a devout woman, played a pivotal role in his upbringing. She introduced young James to the Pilgrim Baptist Church, a place that would become central to his life and career. From a tender age, James showed a natural talent for music. At just 8 years old, he made his solo debut with the church choir, leaving an impression on everyone who heard him. The church's choir director, Thomas A. Dorsey, known as the father of gospel music, took James under his wing. Dorsey's guidance and mentorship were crucial in shaping the future gospel legend. James's early years were filled with music and inspiration. He idolized Roberta Martin, a prominent gospel singer and pianist who also performed at Pilgrim Baptist Church. Martin's influence was profound, and it was her group, the Roberta Martin Singers, that first helped mold James's unique style. Inspired by Martin, young James began to compose his own music, a skill that would later define his career. Life wasn't always easy for James. Growing up during the Great Depression meant that money was tight and luxuries were few. His family couldn't afford a piano, so James did the next best thing. He practiced on the windowsill, using the crevices and wedges as imaginary keys. He often recounted how he would play on these makeshift keys, dreaming of the day when he could perform on a real piano. Despite these challenges, James's dedication never wavered. By the time he was in high school, his parents managed to scrape together enough money to buy him an upright piano. This was a turning point. James practiced tirelessly, honing his skills and developing a style that blended traditional gospel with jazz influences. His talent was undeniable, and it wasn't long before he began attracting attention. As a teenager, James joined a local gospel group called the Thorn Gospel Crusaders. It was here that his talent as a composer started to shine. The group began featuring his compositions, and his work quickly caught the attention of prominent figures in the gospel music community. One of his early compositions, "Grace is Sufficient," performed at a Baptist convention in 1948, was a significant milestone. This performance led Roberto Martin to start publishing his work, marking the beginning of his professional career. During this time, James also became involved with the Soul Winners for Christ, a missionary group created by his teenage friend, Jesse Jameson Phillips. This group, headquartered at Chicago's Greater Harvest Baptist Church, included notable members like Richard D. Hennon. The experience further solidified James's commitment to gospel music and his faith. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. James faced a significant setback when he strained his vocal cords while singing with a local group. This injury gave him the distinctive gravelly voice that would later become his hallmark. Rather than seeing it as a hindrance, James embraced his new voice, using it to add depth and emotion to his performances. Rise to fame. By 1950, James Cleveland was ready to take the gospel world by storm. He joined the Gospelaires, a dynamic trio led by Noralis McKissick and Bessie Folk. This group was all about modernizing traditional gospel tunes. Cleveland's arrangements of classics like "Give Me That Old-Time Religion" and "It's Me, O Lord" breathed new life into these songs. But the Gospelaires didn't last long. When the trio disbanded, Cleveland found himself working with Roberta Martin, one of his early idols, who hired him as a composer and arranger. His big break came with his powerful rendition of "Peace Be Still," which catapulted him to fame. Next up was his collaboration with childhood friend Albertina Walker. Walker had founded the Caravans, a group that would become a launch pad for many gospel legends. Cleveland joined as a composer, arranger, pianist, occasional singer, and even a narrator. The Caravans were a powerhouse, boasting talents like Shirley Caesar, known as the First Lady of Gospel, and Setta George, who co-wrote some of their biggest hits. Other members included Dolores Washington, Josephine Howard Etta Jones, Andrews, Dorothy Norwood, James Herron, and Loliata Holloway. This group was a breeding ground for future gospel stars. In November 1954, Walker gave Cleveland a significant opportunity. She convinced States Records to let him record with her group, marking his first time in a recording studio. Cleveland continued to record with the Caravans until States Records shut down in 1957. This period was critical in establishing his reputation in the gospel music scene. His collaborations with Walker would continue into the late 1970s, producing albums like Reunion in 1977 and the iconic Please Be Patient With Me in 1979, which earned Walker her first gold record. Cleveland didn't stop there. In 1959, he recorded a version of Ray Charles's hit, Hallelujah, I Love Her So, as a solo artist, and by 1960, he had incorporated blues riffs. His rendition of the Soul Stirrers song, The Love of God, backed by the voices of Tabernacle from Detroit, was a hit, earning him a record contract that would change his life forever. Turning point. In 1962, Cleveland signed with Savoy Records, a historic jazz label. This partnership produced a vast catalogue of soul gospel recordings, many captured live in concert settings. Reverend Lawrence Roberts, pastor of the First Baptist Church in Nutley, New Jersey, liked the idea of capturing the spirit of worship live on record. Cleveland and the Angelic Choir of Nutley released several albums together, including the iconic Peace Be Still in September 1963. This album sold thousands of copies and earned Cleveland his first gold album, staying on the Billboard charts for over 15 years. Cleveland then moved to Los Angeles to become Minister of Music at Grace Memorial Church of God in Christ. Here, he worked with keyboardist Billy Preston and the Angelic Choir of Nutley, New Jersey, further boosting his popularity. He formed the James Cleveland Singers, which included Odessa McCarsell, Georgia White, Eugene Bryant, and Billy Preston. By 1965, Cleveland's group included Clyde Brown and Charles Barnett, and they began touring extensively throughout the United States and abroad. Their performances in major venues were highly anticipated. This collaboration produced recordings like Heaven That Will Be Good Enough For Me, Two Wings, and The Lord Is Blessing Me Right Now. Over the years, other talented singers joined the James Cleveland Singers, including Marva Hines and the renowned soprano soloist Cleo Kennedy. They were mainstays in the group until Cleveland died. Southern California Community Choir. He capitalized on his growing fame by founding the Southern California Community Choir, SCCC, a move that would further cement his legacy. The choir became a powerhouse in the gospel world, and in 1975, Cleveland finally won his first Grammy Award with SCCC for the 1974 album In the Ghetto. This was a huge milestone, marking the beginning of a string of successful collaborations with the choir. From 1970 to 1990, Cleveland and SCCC produced several albums. With the 1979 release, It's a New Day, featuring the hit God Is, one of their most successful. Another standout was their 1981 album Where Is Your Faith, which solidified the choir's reputation in the gospel music scene. Cleveland's final Grammy came posthumously in 1991 for the album Having Church, featuring his iconic rendition of Tremaine Hawkins' What Shall I Do? In November 1970, Cleveland took a significant step by founding Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church in Los Angeles. The church started small, but under Cleveland's leadership, it grew to thousands of members. His first album with the church choir, The Voices of Cornerstone, was released in 1980. This album included memorable tracks like Jesus, Lover of My Soul, and A Praying Spirit, written by Elbonita Twinkie Clark and popularized by the Clark sisters. The church's second album, My Expectations, released in 1981, also garnered attention, bringing in talent together. Cleveland didn't just focus on his own choir. He was instrumental in bringing together and supporting numerous gospel artists. He worked with groups like the Donald Vales Choraleers, the Harold Smith Majestics, the Los Angeles Gospel Messengers, and the New Jerusalem Baptist Church Choir. These collaborations produced timeless hits like "Lord, Help Me to Hold Out" and "I Don't Feel No Ways Tired." The James Cleveland Singers also saw several iterations and additions over the years. Starting in 1964, the group included members like Odessa Mastel and Roger Roberts. By 1965, Clyde Brown and Charles Barnett had joined, and the group's extensive tours brought their music to audiences across the United States and beyond. Cleveland's collaborations extended beyond gospel artists. He backed well-known figures like Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, and Elton John. His work with Aretha on her 1972 album, Amazing Grace, remains a landmark in gospel music. This album, recorded live at the New Temple Missionary Baptist Church in Watts, Los Angeles, won a Grammy and sold millions of copies, solidifying its status as the greatest gospel album of all time. The recording of Amazing Grace was also captured on film by director Sidney Pollack. Though it faced a major technical challenge, the film remained shelved for 47 years due to synchronization issues between the audio and video. It wasn't until producer Alan Elliott used modern technology to fix these problems that the documentary was completed. It finally premiered in April 2019, bringing this historic performance to a new generation of fans. Cleveland's influence wasn't limited to music. He also made his mark on film with the historic documentary Say Amen Somebody, released in 1983. This film featured performances by Cleveland and SCCC, along with other gospel legends like Walter Hawkins and the Family, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, Shirley Caesar, and the Clark Sisters. The film's soundtrack, released on Savoy Records, became a top seller, showcasing Cleveland's dominant presence in the gospel world. Gospel Music Workshop of America. By 1968, James Cleveland had established himself as a gospel powerhouse, but he wasn't content with just his own success. He wanted to share his knowledge and passion with others, leading him to co-found the Gospel Music Workshop of America, GMWA, with Albertina Walker. This annual convention quickly became a beacon for aspiring gospel musicians. The GMWA's purpose was clear: to bring together singers from across the country to perpetuate and celebrate gospel music. It worked like a charm. The GMWA grew exponentially, boasting over 150 chapters and 30,000 members. It featured and produced some of the greatest names in gospel music, including Donald Vales, Isaac Douglas, Myrna Summers, Sarah Jordan Powell, Darrell Coley, John P. Key, Kirk Franklin, Kurt Carr, Donald Lawrence, and Yolanda Adams. These workshops attracted thousands of adherents and laid the groundwork for the growing popularity of gospel music. The last album Cleveland recorded with the GMWA was their 1990 release from the previous year's annual convention in New Orleans. Cleveland was also famous for his unique ability to transform pop, R&B, and soul songs into gospel anthems. His most memorable rendition was Gladys Knight and the Pips' "You're the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me," which he reimagined as "Jesus is the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me." This version earned him a Grammy nomination when it was released in 1975 with the Charles Fold Singers of Cincinnati, Ohio. Another standout was his gospel version of Barry Manilow's "I Write the Songs," featured on his 1977 Grammy-winning album Live at Carnegie Hall. Cleveland's last notable gospel rendition was Whitney Houston's "Didn't We Almost Have It All," which he turned into "Aren't You Glad You Know the Lord," and recorded in 1989 with the Northern and Southern California choirs of the GMWA on the album Breathe on Me, featuring Darrell Coley and Milton Bigham. King James Records. From 1985 to 1988, Cleveland ventured into the record business with his own independent label, King James Records, manufactured and distributed by Detroit's Sound of Gospel 9 Records, Inc. King James Records released 3 albums with the GMWA, 1 solo release, Billy Preston's first gospel album, and 2 albums with the Los Angeles Gospel Messengers. Their first release, Praise 88, became particularly popular. Cleveland also resurrected his James Cleveland Presents series, bringing back acts like the Craig Brothers and the 4th of May, and introducing the Harmonizing Four. Unfortunately, the label folded after the distributor closed, Cleveland's efforts with the GMWA and his knack for turning pop hits into gospel classics significantly impacted the gospel music landscape. His ability to blend different musical styles into gospel not only broadened the genre's appeal, but also showcased his creative genius. Whether through workshops, recordings, or his record label, Cleveland's influence continued to grow, cementing his legacy as a pivotal figure in gospel music. The story of James Cleveland is far from over, with hidden facets of his life and career still waiting to be uncovered. Awards and death. James Cleveland's illustrious career was studded with accolades and achievements. Among his most cherished accomplishments were his Grammy Awards, which underscored his immense impact on gospel music. In 1974, Cleveland, along with the Southern California Community Choir, won his first Grammy for Best Soul Gospel Performance with the album In the Ghetto. This recognition solidified his reputation as a leading force in gospel music. Just a few years later, in 1977, he won another Grammy for Best Soul Gospel Performance Traditional for his live album James Cleveland Live at Carnegie Hall. This performance captured the essence of his live shows, filled with energy and spirit. The accolades didn't stop there. In 1980, Cleveland won yet another Grammy for Best Soul Gospel Performance Traditional, this time for his collaboration with the Charles Fold Singers on the album Lord, Let Me Be an Instrument. This award highlighted his ability to bring together different talents to create something extraordinary. His final Grammy came posthumously in 1990 for Best Gospel Album by a Choir or Chorus. The Southern California Community Choir's album Having Church featured Cleveland's iconic rendition of Tremaine Hawkins' What Shall I Do, and demonstrated his enduring influence in the gospel music world. Despite his declining health, Cleveland remained deeply committed to his faith and his music. In the year leading up to his death, respiratory problems had left him unable to sing. Yet, on the last Sunday before his passing, he addressed his congregation at Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church with a powerful message. If I don't see you again, and if I don't sing again, I'm a witness to the fact that the Lord answers prayer. He let my voice come back to me this morning, he told them, leaving an indelible mark on those present. James Cleveland passed away on February 9, 1991, in Culver City, California, at the age of 59. The cause of death was reported as congestive heart failure, and he had fallen into a coma shortly before his death. His passing was a profound loss to the gospel community, and his funeral service at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles drew over 8,000 mourners. It was a testament to the impact he had on so many lives. James Cleveland was laid to rest at Inglewood Park Cemetery in Inglewood, California. His legacy, however, continues to live on through his music, and the countless artists he influenced died interstate. When James Cleveland died, he left behind a complicated legal mess because he didn't have a will. This caused trouble for Andre Cleveland, who claimed he deserved a share of the estate. Andre filed petitions to transfer some of James's property to the estate, but the court didn't make it easy for him. Andre, whose real name is Andre McKissick, said he was like a foster son to James Cleveland. Andre's mother, Esther McKissick, moved to Los Angeles in 1968 and met James. They lived in James's home for 12 years, from when Andre was 12 until he turned 24. James supported Andre and even claimed him as a dependent on his tax returns. Andre argued that James wanted to adopt him, but his mother refused because she wanted Andre to keep her surname. In court, Andre tried to prove he was an interested person under a specific probate law. This law allows a foster child or stepchild to inherit if there's clear evidence that the deceased would have adopted them, but for a legal barrier. However, the court decided that no legal barrier existed once Andre turned 18, which was 16 years before James's death. This meant Andre didn't qualify to claim part of the estate. On November 6, 1991, Andre filed petitions to transfer property to James's estate. Annette Mae Thomas, the trustee of James's trust, opposed these petitions. She argued that Andre lacked standing because he was not legally adopted and was only mentioned as a friend and godson in the trust, with a specific gift of $110,000, which he received. Annette filed for summary judgment, and the court granted it. The judge agreed that Andre did not qualify as an interested person because the legal barrier to his adoption, his mother's refusal, ceased to exist when he turned 18. Despite living with James and receiving support, no adoption process was initiated after Andre became an adult. This meant he had no legal right to inherit under the probate law. Andre appealed the decision, but the appellate court upheld the summary judgment. The court emphasized that the law required a legal barrier to be the only reason the adoption didn't happen. Since Andre's mother's refusal was no longer an issue after he turned 18, James had plenty of time to adopt him if he wanted to, but he didn't. His daughter. One significant aspect of his personal life was his relationship with his daughter, Leanne Cleveland, and her mother, Jean Irvin. In October 1991, Jean Irvin, a member of the Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church, publicly asserted her claim as the mother of James Cleveland's only biological child, Leanne Cleveland, born in 1965. Irvin's statements were significant. She claimed that Andre M. Cleveland, often considered James Cleveland's adopted son, was actually one of many homeless children whom Cleveland had taken in over the years. This claim cast doubt on the nature of Andre's adoption, suggesting that he was part of a broader pattern of Cleveland's benevolence towards children in need rather than a formal adoption. Leanne Cleveland's existence and her relationship with her father were not widely publicized during Cleveland's lifetime. However, Irvin's claim brought her into the public eye, emphasizing the familial bonds that were often overshadowed by Cleveland's public engagements and controversies. Irvin's assertions provided a more nuanced understanding of Cleveland's family dynamics, revealing a side of him that was deeply personal and rooted in real human connections. The inclusion of Leanne in James Cleveland's estate planning underscored his commitment to her future. Cleveland's estate documents, drafted before his death, specifically allocated a portion of his assets to Leanne, ensuring her financial security. This act was not just a legal formality, but a clear statement of his paternal responsibility and love, despite the complexities of their relationship. Dark side. Beyond his musical achievements and influence, there were darker aspects of his life that came to light after his death, involving his former foster son, Christopher Harris. Christopher Harris, who once went by the name Christopher Cleveland, was a young member of Cleveland's Los Angeles church choir. At 13, Harris was the only boy alto, standing at 6 feet tall and looking much older than his age. James Cleveland took a special interest in Harris. This relationship, however, turned into something sinister. Harris alleged that he endured 5 years of abuse at the hands of Cleveland, beginning when he was just 13. This abuse reportedly continued until Harris contracted HIV. He later filed a lawsuit against Cleveland's estate, seeking justice for the years of abuse. The case was settled out of court, and while Harris is prohibited from discussing the settlement's details, he has spoken about his life with Cleveland. Harris described how Cleveland exploited his dreams and naivety. He wanted to sing and looked up to Cleveland, who promised to help him, but instead used his position to manipulate and control him. Harris's claims were shocking, but they also shed light on a broader issue within the church and the gospel music community. Cleveland's sexual orientation was an open secret among those close to him. People in his inner circle and at his church knew about his relationships with young men, but chose to ignore them, pretending nothing was wrong. This cult of silence and denial allowed the behavior to continue unchecked. James Cleveland's death was officially attributed to heart failure, but Harris hinted at a different cause. He suggested that the heart failure diagnosis was a cover-up for the real reason behind Cleveland's death. This insinuation further complicated Cleveland's legacy, intertwining his contributions to gospel music with the personal scandals that surfaced after his death. James Cleveland's journey is a multifaceted tale. He was a musical genius who revolutionized gospel music, yet his personal actions left a significant impact on his legacy. If this exploration of James Cleveland's life interested you, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and turn on notifications for more in-depth looks at influential figures.